In the big, busy city of Abuja, there lived a young woman named Amaka. She worked as a bank teller, counting money all day. But Amaka wanted more. She dreamed of fancy clothes, big houses, and shiny cars. Every night, she would look at fashion magazines and wish she could buy all the pretty things. Amaka had a friend named Emeka. He was a teacher at a small school. Emeka didn't have much money, but he had a big heart. He loved Amaka very much and wanted to marry her. Emeka would bring Amaka small gifts like flowers or chocolates. He would take her on simple dates to the park or local restaurants. But Amaka wasn't sure about Emeka. She liked him, but she worried about money. Emeka is nice, she thought, but when will he ever be rich? I don't want to be poor all my life. So even though Emeka was kind and loving, Amaka kept her heart closed. One day, Amaka went to the gym to exercise. As she was leaving, she saw something that made her stop and stare. A big, shiny black car pulled up in front of the gym. It was the kind of car Amaka had only seen in movies. The car door opened, and out stepped a tall, handsome man. He was wearing a suit that looked very expensive. This man was named Obiora. He was a rich businessman who owned many companies. Obiora saw Amaka looking at him and smiled. He walked right up to her. "Hello, beautiful lady," said Obiora. "I'm new at this gym. Could you show me around?" Amaka felt her heart beat fast. She had never talked to such a rich and handsome man before. "Of course," she said, trying to sound calm. "I'd be happy to show you." Over the next few weeks, Obiora and Amaka spent a lot of time together. Obiora took Amaka to fancy restaurants she had never been to before. He bought her expensive clothes and jewelry. Amaka felt like she was living in a dream. She quickly forgot all about Emeka and his simple gifts. After only 2 months of dating, Obiora asked Amaka to marry him. He gave her a ring with the biggest diamond Amaka had ever seen. Amaka was so excited, she said yes right away. She didn't stop to think if she really knew Obiora well enough to marry him. When Amaka told her parents about the engagement, they were overjoyed. "Our daughter is marrying a rich man," they said happily. "Now all our problems are over." They didn't ask Amaka if she really loved Obiora. They only cared about his money. But not everyone was happy about the engagement. When Emeka heard the news, he was heartbroken. He came to Amaka's house to talk to her one last time. "Please, Amaka," Emeka begged. "Don't marry this man you barely know. I love you, and I promise I will work hard to give you a good life. It might not be a rich life, but it will be a happy one." For a moment, Amaka felt uncertain. She remembered all the good times she had with Emeka. But then she looked down at her big diamond ring. She thought about Obiora's fancy car and big house. "I'm sorry, Emeka," she said. "But I've made my choice. I'm going to marry Obiora." Emeka left with tears in his eyes. Amaka felt a little sad, but she told herself she was doing the right thing. "I'll be rich," she thought. "That's what's most important." The wedding day arrived. It was the biggest, fanciest wedding anyone in Abuja had ever seen. Amaka wore a beautiful white dress that cost more money than she used to make in a year at the bank. Everyone was talking about how lucky she was to marry such a rich man. Amaka's parents couldn't stop smiling. They kept telling everyone how proud they were. Obiora looked handsome in his expensive suit. When he put the gold wedding ring on Amaka's finger, Amaka felt like all her dreams had come true. But as soon as the wedding was over, things started to change. Obiora took Amaka to his big mansion. Amaka was excited to see her new home. But when they went inside, she got a surprise. The house was big, but it felt cold and empty. There were no family photos on the walls. No colorful pillows on the couches. It didn't feel like a home at all. But that wasn't the biggest shock. Everywhere Amaka looked, she saw dogs. Big dogs, small dogs, all kinds of dogs. There were at least 20 dogs running around the house. "Welcome home, my dear," said Obiora. "I hope you like dogs. They are very important to me." Amaka was confused. Obiora had never said anything about liking dogs before. But she didn't want to seem ungrateful, so she tried to smile. "Of course," she said. "They're lovely." That night, Amaka got another big surprise. She thought she and Obiora would sleep in the same room, like most married couples. But Obiora went to sleep in a different room. And he took his favorite dog, a big Rottweiler, with him. "Don't worry," Obiora told Amaka when he saw her confused face. "This is just how things are done in my family. The dogs are very special. You'll understand soon." Amaka didn't understand at all. But she was too afraid to ask questions. She went to her room alone, feeling very strange and lonely. Days passed, and Amaka grew more and more unhappy. Obiora spent all his time with the dogs. He hardly ever talked to Amaka, except to tell her to feed the dogs or clean up after them. Amaka felt more like a servant than a wife. One day, about a week after the wedding, something happened that scared Amaka very much. She was walking past Obiora's office when she heard him talking on the phone. Amaka didn't mean to listen, but she heard something that made her stop. "Yes, the marriage is complete," Obiora was saying. "Now the dog's power will be even stronger. My wealth will double this year." Amaka felt like her blood turned to ice. She realized with horror that Obiora had married her for some strange reason involving his dogs. She wasn't a wife to him at all, she was just part of some weird plan to make more money. Amaka ran to her room and cried. She felt stupid and ashamed. She had married a man she barely knew, all because she wanted to be rich. Now she was trapped in a big, cold house full of dogs, with a husband who didn't love her at all. Amaka thought about calling her parents, but she was too embarrassed. They were so proud of her rich husband. How could she tell them the truth? And where would she go if she left? She had quit her job at the bank when she got married. She had no money of her own. For days, Amaka walked around the big house like a ghost. She fed the dogs and cleaned up after them, but her heart wasn't in it. She felt lost and alone. She thought about Emeka and wondered if he ever thought about her. "I made such a big mistake," she thought. "But now it's too late." But there was one person in the house who was kind to Amaka. This was Ada, the maid. Ada had worked for Obiora for many years. She could see how sad Amaka was. One day, while they were folding laundry together, Ada decided to speak up. "Madam," Ada said quietly, looking around to make sure no one could hear. "I know you are not happy here. This is not a good place. The master, he does bad things with those dogs. You should leave before it's too late." Amaka was shocked. She hadn't realized Ada could see how unhappy she was. And what did Ada mean about Obiora doing bad things with the dogs? But Amaka was too afraid to ask. "But how can I leave?" Amaka whispered back. "I have nowhere to go. And Obiora will never let me leave. He'll be so angry." Ada patted Amaka's hand gently. "Don't worry," she said. "I will help you. But first, you must pray." Ask God for forgiveness for marrying for money. Ask for strength to do the right thing. Then we will make a plan." Amaka nodded, feeling a small spark of hope for the first time in weeks. That night, she knelt by her bed and prayed harder than she ever had before. "God, please forgive me," she whispered. "I was foolish and greedy. Please give me the strength to fix my mistake." As the days passed, Amaka kept praying every night. She started to feel a little stronger. She began to think that maybe, just maybe, she could find a way out of this bad situation. One afternoon, about a month after Amaka's wedding, Ada came to her with excitement in her eyes. "Madam," she said, "I have good news. The master will be away at a big business dinner tomorrow night. That's our chance. I will call a taxi for you. Pack only what you need, some clothes and any money you have. I'll leave the back door unlocked. As soon as it gets dark, you must run and not look back." Amaka felt scared but also relieved. This was her chance to escape. She hugged Ada tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll never forget how kind you've been to me." That night, Amaka couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about what would happen the next day. Would she really have the courage to leave? Where would she go? But she knew one thing for sure: anywhere was better than staying in this strange, cold house with a man who saw her as part of a business deal. The next day arrived, and Amaka felt both scared and excited. She kept checking the clock, waiting for evening to come. Every time Obiora walked by, her heart beat faster. She was afraid he would somehow know what she was planning. Finally, Obiora left for his business dinner. As soon as his car drove away, Amaka ran to her room. She pulled her packed suitcase from under the bed. Then she waited, listening for Ada's signal. At last, Ada knocked softly on her door. "It's time, madam," she whispered. "The taxi is waiting down the street. Go now, and be safe." Amaka hugged Ada one last time. Then she took a deep breath and walked to the back door. Her hands were shaking as she opened it. For a moment, she hesitated. Was she really brave enough to do this? But then she thought about how unhappy she had been. She thought about Obiora's strange behavior and the scary things he said about the dogs. Amaka knew she had to leave. She ran down the driveway and out to the street. Just as Ada had said, a taxi was waiting. Amaka jumped in, her heart pounding. "Where to, madam?" the driver asked. Amaka thought for a moment. There was only one place she could go, her parents' house. Even if they were angry, she knew they would take her in. "Number 15 Mango Street," she told the driver. Then she sat back, watching the city lights pass by. She felt scared, but also relieved. She was free. When Amaka arrived at her parents' house, they were very surprised to see her. At first, they didn't believe her story about Obiora and the dogs. They thought she was making excuses because she didn't want to be married anymore. But when they saw the fear in Amaka's eyes, they realized she was telling the truth. Amaka's mother started to cry. "Oh, my daughter," she said, hugging Amaka tight. "We are so sorry. We should have listened to you before the wedding. We were too excited about the money. Can you ever forgive us?" Amaka cried too, but they were tears of relief. "Of course I forgive you," she said. "I'm just glad to be home." For the next few weeks, Amaka stayed inside her parents' house. She was afraid Obiora would come looking for her. But he never did. It seemed he had simply moved on to find another wife for his strange dog rituals. Slowly, Amaka started to rebuild her life. She went back to her old job at the bank. The manager was happy to have her back because she had always been a good worker. Amaka spent time with her family and started to feel like herself again. But something was still missing. Amaka couldn't stop thinking about Emeka, the kind teacher she had rejected. She felt terrible about how she had treated him. Even if he didn't want to see her, Amaka knew she needed to apologize. One day, Amaka gathered all her courage and went to Emeka's school. But when she arrived, she got a big surprise. The school was much bigger than before. There was a shiny new sign that said, Emeka's Academy for Gifted Children. Confused, Amaka went inside. The school looked very different. Everything was new and modern. There were many classrooms, and Amaka could hear children laughing and learning. Then she saw Emeka. He was standing in the hallway, talking to a group of parents. He was wearing a nice suit and looked very confident. When he saw Amaka, his eyes got wide with surprise. "Amaka," he said. "What are you doing here?" Amaka's heart sank. Emeka looked so successful now. He had probably forgotten all about her. But she had come this far, so she decided to tell the truth. "Emeka, can we talk?" she asked. "I need to tell you something important." Emeka nodded and led her to his office. It was a big, nice room with awards on the walls. Amaka took a deep breath and started to speak. "Emeka, I made a terrible mistake," she said. "I married a bad man because I was greedy for money. But now I've left him. I know it's too late, but I wanted to tell you I'm sorry. You were always the better man." Emeka was quiet for a long moment. Amaka was sure he was going to ask her to leave. But then he smiled softly. "Amaka," he said, "it's never too late to fix a mistake. Why don't you sit down? Let's talk." For the next few hours, Amaka and Emeka talked. Amaka told him everything that had happened with Obiora. She cried as she described how lonely and scared she had been. Emeka listened without judging her. "I'm so sorry you went through that," he said when she finished. "It must have been very hard. But Amaka, I have something to tell you too." Emeka explained that after Amaka rejected him, he had been very sad. But instead of giving up, he worked harder than ever. He found people who believed in his ideas for a better school. They gave him money to make the school bigger and better. "In a way, losing you made me push myself harder," Emeka said. "I wanted to prove that I could be successful." Amaka's eyes filled with tears. "You've done so well, Emeka. I'm happy for you. I just wish." She couldn't finish her sentence. But Emeka seemed to understand. He reached out and took her hand. "Amaka," he said gently, "there's something else you should know. I'm married now. My wife and I are expecting a baby soon." Amaka felt her heart drop. Of course Emeka was married. How could she have hoped otherwise? She started to stand up, feeling embarrassed. But then Emeka continued, "Wait, Amaka. There's more. My wife has been looking for someone to manage the school's money. Someone with experience in banking. Would you be interested in that job?" Amaka looked up in shock. "You'd give me a job? After everything?" Emeka smiled. "The past is the past. You've learned from your mistakes. Now it's time to move forward. What do you say?" Amaka couldn't believe it. This was more than she had ever hoped for. A chance to work at a good job, to be near Emeka as a friend. It was a new start. "Yes," she said, smiling through her tears. "Yes, I'd love to." From that day on, Amaka's life began to change. she threw herself into her new job at Emeka's school. She was good with numbers, and she loved helping the school grow. For the first time in a long time, Amaka felt proud of herself. Emeka's wife, Adana, turned out to be very kind. She didn't treat Amaka like someone from Emeka's past. Instead, she welcomed Amaka as a friend. Soon, Amaka was spending time with both Emeka and Adana. She even helped them get ready for their new baby. Months passed, and Amaka grew stronger and happier. She still lived with her parents, but now she was saving money for her own small apartment. She had new friends at work and was even thinking about taking some night classes to learn new skills. One evening, as Amaka was walking home from work, she passed the gym where she had first met Obiora. She stopped and looked at it for a moment. Then she smiled and kept walking. That part of her life was over. She had learned an important lesson, but she wasn't going to let it hold her back anymore. When Amaka got home, she found her mother cooking dinner. Her father was reading the newspaper. It was a simple, happy scene. Amaka realized that this was what she had been looking for all along. Not fancy clothes or big houses, but love and peace. That night, as she got ready for bed, Amaka said a prayer of thanks. She was grateful for her second chance at a good life. She had learned that true happiness doesn't come from money or fancy things. It comes from doing work you care about, being with people who love you, and being true to yourself. Amaka thought about how far she had come. She had made a big mistake, but she had found the courage to fix it. Now she had a job she liked, good friends, and a family who supported her. She even had a small savings account that was growing every month. Maybe someday I'll find someone to love, Amaka thought as she drifted off to sleep. But for now, I'm happy just as I am. The next morning, Amaka woke up early. She put on her work clothes and looked at herself in the mirror. She saw a strong woman who had been through hard times but came out stronger. She was proud of who she had become. As Amaka walked to work, she smiled at the people she passed. The sun was shining, and she felt full of hope. She knew there would still be hard days ahead. Life wasn't always easy. But now she had the strength to face whatever came her way. Amaka walked into the school, ready to start another day. As she passed Emeka's office, he waved at her with a friendly smile. Adana was there too, her belly big with a baby that would arrive soon. They both looked happy to see Amaka. At that moment, Amaka knew for sure that everything would be okay. She had found her place in the world. It wasn't the life she had once dreamed of, full of riches and fancy things. But it was real, and it was good. And that was worth more than all the money in the world. And so, dear listeners, that is the end of Amaka's story. She learned that the greatest wealth is not in our bank accounts, but in our hearts. May we all remember to value love, kindness, and honesty above all else. For these are the true riches of life. The story of Amaka teaches us that true happiness and fulfillment come from within, not from material possessions or wealth. It's important to value genuine relationships, personal growth, and meaningful work over the pursuit of money and status. Remember, the richest life is one filled with love, integrity, and purpose. If you enjoyed this tale of redemption and self-discovery, don't forget to subscribe for more captivating stories that entertain and inspire. Each narrative holds a valuable lesson waiting to be uncovered. Stay tuned for our next engaging tale.